Good afternoon, everyone. So welcome to another CAD seminar. Today we have Professor Corey Harper from Carnegie Mellon University. So Professor Corey Harper holds a PhD and Master's in Civil Engineering from Carnegie Mellon University and a Bachelor's in Civil Engineering from Morgan State University. Dr. Harper is now an assistant professor at CMU. And he's the assistant professor there at the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department and the High School of Information Systems and Public Policy. He's also the director of the Future Mobility Systems Lab at CMU, and his research interest lies in applying modeling and simulation and multi-source data analytics to assess equity, environmental, congestion, and policy implications of emerging technologies on transportation systems, such as autonomous vehicles and micromobility. So let's welcome Professor Harper.
Thanks, Anon, and nice to meet everyone. I'm Corey Harper, and today I'm going to talk about, present to you some of my research and projects that I have going on in my lab. And I'm going to talk to you about how we can start to advance towards a smarter and more sustainable transportation system. All right, so my research uses systems modeling, right? To help stakeholders make more informed infrastructure and policy decisions, so that we can have this smoother transition, right? And if we look at this graph, it captures what I think are some important components of a smart city from a systems perspective, right? So smart design refers to designing cities with pedestrian safety and people at the forefront, right? Smart economy and living refers to making sure that people have access to reliable transportation options and job opportunities. Smart mobility and environment refers to reducing congestion and emissions in our transportation sector. And smart governance talks about the policies that shape the sustainability of our transportation system. And today I'm going to walk you through how my research can help us advance towards this smart city. So if we look at this graph right here, it shows that all of the components of a smart city are all interconnected, right? So in the blue, you have your transportation system components, and in the green, you have components of a city that interact with the transportation system components, and vice versa, right? And what my research does is it looks at the links between these components. So for example, my research on automated freight helps us better understand how platooning technologies could impact congestion, while my research using high-resolution rainfall data helps us to better understand how heavy rainfall events could impact traffic flow, right? And people are at the top of this list, right? And that's because the goal of my research is to improve quality of life for people by looking at emerging trends in transportation. So, like I said, I'll present some research to you, but here's my group of students that do a lot of the work that you're going to see today, right? So I have 6 students. They all focus on different things, different emerging trends in transportation that can help us to advance towards that smarter and more sustainable smart city. So I have a student focusing on micromobility systems. I have another one focusing on last mile delivery, ride sharing. I have another one doing some work on COVID, looking at transportation systems and decision analysis. Maine looks at equitable transportation automation. Sophia helps us to better manage and plan for vehicle electrification, especially as we face supply chain issues. And Elizabeth is looking at equity and how different transit-oriented developments impact displacement of different populations, right? So here's my superstar team. This is I run the Future Mobility Systems Lab. So some of the research I present to you today is done by these group of students. So today we're going to talk about robocars, how they could impact land use, parking economics, in our downtown urban cores. That's the first thing we're going to talk about. We're also going to go through some of my micromobility work and how people switching from personally owned vehicles for short trips to micromobility, how that could impact congestion, energy use, and emissions. And then I'll go into some current work that I'm doing that talks about next steps for smart cities and policy. So, some of the motivation for the work that we're doing, especially the autonomous vehicle research, is, we're starting to see road fatalities go up, right? So on the y-axis, you have the number of deaths. On the x-axis, you have the years, right? So let's say from about 1975 to about it went up a little bit then, from about 1980 was going up, then it started to go down, but let's say from about 1985 to about 2010, about 2014 or so, fatalities were going down, right? We're doing pretty good, right? And we're focusing on this this red line because it normalizes everything, right? Fatalities could go up, BMT goes up, but this divides it by per 100 million BMT. So things are looking good, right? Around 2015, 2016 or so, things start to change a little bit, right? So from 2015 to 2016, we saw one of the biggest spikes in traffic deaths that we've seen in a really long time, right? So in 2015, we had about 32,000 traffic deaths. In 2016, we had about 35,000 traffic deaths, right? So one of the biggest increases in a one-year span that we've seen in a really long time, right? And now, even today, we're starting to see a lot of pedestrian fatalities increasing, and the number of fatalities, they're up. They're a lot higher than what we're seeing here, right? So there's an issue on the road in terms of safety, right? Now, to put this in some perspective, this is about 670 fatalities per week, right? So 35,000 road fatalities, about 670 fatalities per week. This is beyond the capacity of a jumbo jet at its highest capacity configuration, which is about 660 passengers, right? So in other words, if there was a plane crash each week, this still would equal the total number of deaths on the roadway each year, right? Now, when there's a plane crash, we all panic, and this is going to hit the news, right? So this is showing us that we have a lot of road crashes on the road each year. We need to do something about it, right? Connecting automated vehicles. This technology has the potential to address some of the issues that we see on our roadways, right? Now, these vehicles could very well be on our streets and roadways one day, right? Within some of the coming decades, we can start to see some of these vehicles on our roadways, right? Now, we do have some of the lower level automation technologies that we're seeing in cars today, right? Such as adaptive cruise control, right? And active lane keeping technology, right? So we're seeing some of those technologies on our roadways, and a lot of car companies are continuously working to advance and develop more advanced systems in cars that are commercially available, right? So we do have some automated technologies on the roadway today, right? Car company Tesla offers a full step driving. Offers a full self-driving technology package on all Model S sedans and Model X SUVs in exchange for about $15,000, right? Technology company Waymo has deployed fleets of self-driving vehicles in San Francisco and Phoenix, and the United States Department of Transportation has released its fourth AV policy document, providing guidance and best practices to manufacturers and entities on the safe design and testing of these vehicles, right? So this is a show that there's a lot of development of these technologies coming from the federal government, car manufacturers, and technology companies, right? And autonomous vehicles, right? They do three things. So in a sense, they plan and they act, right? they sense the world around them by classifying different things on the roadways, right? So stop signs, other pedestrians and other cars, right? They plan their next maneuver, right? So hey, a stop sign is coming. What should I do next, right? And they act, right? So the physical connection of applying the brakes. Now, this is similar to what we do on the roadways, right? We all sense, plan, and act, but the hope is that autonomous vehicles can do this a lot better and faster than we can, and without getting distracted. So here are the 6 levels of automation using emoji, right? So smiley emoji represents tasks that are done by the human, and the robot emoji represents tasks that are going to be done by the vehicle, right? Now, it's not really until levels 4 and 5 that you can begin to see people doing other things in a car, besides driving, right? So sleeping in your back seat, watching your favorite Netflix movie, or taking a Zoom call and not really paying attention to the roadway, right? So these are your high levels of automation, where you can kind of sit back. The robocars in control, you don't really have to do anything, right? Now, there's also level 3 vehicles, right? Level 3 is a little more shaky, a little bit of a gray area, right? Because the robot is responsible for driving and monitoring, but you still have to be aware and capable of intervening if a situation takes place, right? Now, what we're really good at is levels 1 and 2, right? So this is where the robocar is the backup driver. You're the main driver. And we've done a lot of research in the area looking at crash safety, and we saw that there's a lot of benefits here, right? But today, we're going to be looking at your levels 4 and 5 vehicles, where the robot is in control of most of the driving functions, and it can do things like, park the car for you in a very distant area, or something like that, right? But we're going to talk about levels 4 and 5, some future scenarios where the robocar is in control of everything, and the human has to go into the car, enter a destination, and you get to go where you need to go, right? So as we transition to connecting automated vehicles, there are different futures, right, that we could all imagine, right? So there's the Tesla model, where everybody owns their own autonomous vehicle, right? Or there could be some ride-sharing company that has a pod, or some shared autonomous vehicle that transports people around the city, right? Now, there are a lot of transportation engineers that say, well, of course, these vehicles are going to be shared, right? But I think it's important to explore scenarios that don't lead to these outcomes. And if this is an outcome then we don't want to encourage, then we need to be active in understanding this. So what you see in this picture are, a residential area, right? And as we move towards an automated vehicle future, we have to, think about how the public realm prices parking, right? So there you have a picture, you have some apartments, maybe some single-family homes, maybe some students here. This is a street in Pittsburgh, right? In this neighborhood, we're going to price the public realm by requiring residents to pay for a parking sticker, right? So if you park in this neighborhood, let's say one of you invite one of you to Pittsburgh, right? And you gotta, this is about CMU. You come there, you park in this parking spot right here, right? You pull up, you get out your car, you start to walk towards CMU, right? What's going to happen is a parking mate is going to come by, right? They're going to check to see if you have a parking sticker. If you have a parking sticker, they're going to leave your car alone. If you don't, they'll take your tag down. 2 hours later, if you're still parked there, they'll come back and give you a ticket, right? Now, in many urban areas, we price the public realm by requiring residents to have a parking permit. Otherwise, we charge them a fee, right? Now, this street is near Carnegie Mellon, right? So if there wasn't this residential parking sign here, right? One could park there, maybe walk 10 or 15 minutes to campus to avoid parking charges, right? Now, what happens when you have a robocard that can decouple the proximity value of where it drops you off at and where you have to park, right? So, let's say that we invited, one of y'all to come to CMU to do a talk, right? Let's say that you rented a car from the airport, now you're driving to CMU. One of the things you're gonna have to figure out what to do next is where to park, right? And there are a few options. You can park in the parking garage, it's gonna be $10 to $15 a day. You can park on the street close to CMU is gonna cost you $2 to $3 an hour, but you have to make a decision on where to park, right? Or it might be a nice sunny day, you can park 10, 15, 20 minutes, you might not mind taking that walk, right? But either way, there's all some value that we're all willing to pay to be closer to our destination, right? So what we looked at was what happens if you have a robo-car that could drop you off at your destination, go park somewhere, and then come pick you up when you're ready, right? And before the study was done, there was a lot of studies that looked at shared automated vehicles. This is the first study that looked at privately owned autonomous cars and what happens when they can choose to park in cheaper, more distant parking lots. So we did this study in Seattle, right? And in the green, you have your unrestricted parking zones where you can park for free throughout the course of the day without any restrictions. In the red, you have your parking lots and garages. The red shows your downtown area. You're going to be if you choose to park in one of those places, you're going to be charged some fee, right? $10, $15, $20 a day, right? And what we did was we found portions of Seattle where there were abundant amounts of unrestricted parking available, and we set up these zones, right? We assume that during the course of the day, about half of these parking spots will be unoccupied, so about 32,000 parking spots throughout the day. And all these sample zones are going to represent places that autonomous vehicles can park at and make decisions on do I travel extra 5 miles or do I park pretty close to where my owner is downtown somewhere, right? So the objective of each AV is to minimize the total cost of the user, right? So total cost of the user is the round trip cost of driving. This considers things like maintenance costs, fuel costs, tires, and then you have the daily parking costs, right? So in the unrestricted parking zones in the green, those are free, so those are $0 a day. And then you have the associated cost of parking downtown. Every lot is a little different. Some might be 7, some might be 10, some might be 5, right? This is subject to availability at each parking lot, right? So there must be an available parking spot for an AV to be able to park it, right? And each parking decision is going to have some implications in terms of travel demand and greenhouse gas emissions, right? So, this is your emissions factor, right? So your emissions factor is the amount of direct carbon dioxide in a gallon of gasoline, multiplied by the fuel economy of the average vehicle in Seattle, multiplied by the additional empty travel generated from you searching for a cheaper parking spot, right? So in order to demonstrate how this model works, we first place a single AV downtown. Starting point is where you see the star at, and we have it making decisions on where to park it, right? Now, remember, the point of the AV is to minimize total cost of the user, right? So first it figures out where's the cheapest parking lot. That's number 1. The second cheapest parking lot is going to be ranked number 2. Third cheapest parking lot is ranked number 3, so on and so forth, right? Now, because the cost of driving is really low compared to the cost of driving downtown, the AV's first spot is going to be the closest free parking zone to relative to a starting point, right? Now, if there's no parking available there, it's going to go through and say, okay, what's my second choice, right? Second choice is going to be here, so on and so forth until an available parking spot is found. Right now, we're going through about 3 choices right now. Right now, one question we have while we're doing this is, would an AV from up here be willing to travel this far to, that's about 10 miles away. It's going to be willing to travel that far to obtain cheaper parking, right? So let's place some more AVs downtown and let's see what happens when AVs have to make some more complicated decisions, right? But it's at least to give you an idea of how the AV is making decisions within this modeling framework. So right now, this is when there's no AVs. And this is just to show you how the state of things are right now in Seattle. So right now we see a lot of parking lots and garages. There's a lot of green downtown. There's a lot of high occupancy. Remember, these are about 50% full, right? So your unrestricted parking is also 50% full. Downtown, there's a lot of people parking there. There's high demand for parking right now, right? Now let's see what happens when we place some AVs around town, right? Now, AVs at 25% penetration. We start to see that a lot of the unrestricted parking zones close to the downtown area, they begin to fill up, right? They have pretty high occupancy, and now we see a lot more low occupancy downtown, right? So people are starting to leave the downtown area, but these parking spots are pretty close to the downtown area, right? So it makes sense that they'll start to fill up pretty quickly, right? Now, we increased the AV penetration rate to 50%, right? Now we're seeing that AVs are actually willing to travel farther distances to get cheaper parking, right? So we've seen that pretty much all of the parking lots or unrestricted parking zones close to the downtown area, they started to fill up, and now the unrestricted parking further away from the downtown area, AVs are now starting to travel there, right? Now, when we get to 100% AVs, we see that it's no longer economically viable to own and operate a parking lot downtown, right? All AVs have chosen to leave the downtown area because parking downtown is pretty expensive, right? Whereas the cost to own and operate an AV is pretty low, right? So people say, hey, there's no point in me parking downtown. I can call the AV. Maybe I have to wait an extra 5 minutes, but that's worth me avoiding that high charge to park downtown, right? So AVs, they're traveling really far distances, over 10 miles, just to get cheaper parking, right? Now, the reason for this is because, for example, the lowest cost to park downtown is about $7, right? Per mile operational cost of driving is 25 cents per mile, right? Round trip break even distance would be 28 miles, right? This means that unless there's a parking, there would have to be no free parking within 28 miles of downtown. Sorry, about 14 miles of downtown, right? This is round trip, right? There and back, right? So within 14 miles of downtown for an AV to choose to park in the cheapest parking lot downtown versus to go somewhere else for parking, right? So what this is illustrating to you is, even somewhere like Seattle where they generate hundreds of millions of dollars a year in terms of parking, there's enough free parking close to the downtown area that AVs would decide to go elsewhere if they had that opportunity to, right? Now, even though we see that, parking economics, from an economic standpoint, this could be detrimental, especially, for the city, parking lot owners, VMT and energy use, they don't go up that much, right? And the reason is because there are a lot more cars traveling in, out, and around Seattle during the course of the day than there are cars parked downtown, right? So even if they choose to go to these more distant parking lots, for example, emissions would increase by 2%, VMT would increase by 2.5%, right? Now, it's going to depend on what time of day these vehicles are traveling, right? If they're traveling during peak hour, AM, PM hours, which, they very likely could be because that's when a lot of people go to work. You can see a lot more congestion, right? It's not congestion and VMT are not linear, right? If you put cars on a congested road, travel time is going to increase exponentially, right? So it depends on what time of day, what routes these cars are traveling, right? Now, like I said, right, Seattle generates about $170 billion in annual parking revenue from downtown. So, we have to figure out what else to do with this land, right? If this did happen, do we put policies in place to, do we just restrict parking and, put the 2-hour sign there, then would the AVs just go from zone to zone or, so there's a big policy question, right? But parking takes up a lot of land. If this were to come true, we could think about how to, repurpose some of these. Do we want to put more parks in some places? Do we want to put libraries? Can these be turned into different office spaces? And like I said, right, so on average, each AV is traveling about 8 extra miles per day in the 100% AV scenario. Depending on where these AVs start to travel at, specific corridors are going to bear the most impacts. And what if AVs were shared EVs? or we could boost transit, right? So some other interesting ideas that we could do in future work to see some of the implications and some of the impacts. All right, so now we're going to get into some of my micromobility research, right? And one thing I've always wanted to do was kind of re-envision the way we travel, right? And in a lot of urban areas, we take a lot of car trips, right? So how can we start to get people into more active modes of transportation, right? So this is a city. What you're seeing here is a picture of the city of Pittsburgh, Pogo. That's the bike share company there. They have electric bikes. They're really fun to ride, but they're meant to do what I just said: get people out of cars into more active modes of transportation. We looked at the upper bound of trips that can be replaced by micromobility. We developed a framework to estimate that, right? So in a lot of cities, there's a really large potential for micromobility, right? So if you look at this chart on the left right here, right? Maybe we can make it bigger next time, but it shows you the top 10 cities and their micromobility potential in terms of number of short trips that can be replaced by cars, scooters, things like that, right? Now, if you look at Pittsburgh, 50% of short trips between 0 and 3 miles are done by car, right? If you look at other places like New York, New York is very transit-centric place, right? 51 of their trips between 0 and 3 miles are done by cars, right? So even in places where we would imagine, cars wouldn't be the main mode of transportation, especially for trips that could be done by walk or other modes, it's still highly used, right? So, I saw this and I said, well, cars generate a lot of congestion. We have all these climate change target emission goals. Could we get to this 50%, right? This is a lot of trips, right? That's a lot of cars on the road, right? If you look at this picture, right? 200 people in 177 cars, right? They're taking up all the lanes, right? It's it's so many cars, right? And if you look at the people on bikes, they're taking up one lane, so in terms of congestion, health, emissions, there could be a lot of impacts, right? But at the same point in time, I said, well, could we actually get to this 50%, right? In Pittsburgh, it rains a lot, most people don't want to ride bikes during the rain, so what can we actually get to? Can we get to 50%? Can we get to 100% of this 50%, or can we get to 20%, right? And it just shows you that most trips aren't done by bike. They're done by a personally owned vehicle. So can we get this red portion to be a bigger portion, right? Now, in order to do this, we combine data analysis techniques with simulation, right? So, we got some household, some weather data. We found a number of short trips that could be identified by cars. We'll show you the framework for doing that. We were able to estimate some upper bound potential for micromobility, right? So what's the most that we can get to? And then we started to integrate these numbers into a traffic simulation. We updated peak hour demand based on this upper bound, and we were able to estimate impacts to congestions, emissions, and energy use, right? So here's our upper bound replacement method, right? So first we got some household travel data from the Puget Sound Regional Council, and we also got some hourly weather data, right? So our first question was this trip during PM peak hours? Was it a private vehicle trip? And was the distance less than or equal to 3 miles? If yes, trip is potentially replaceable, right? Then we have to look at different trip conditions, right? So all trips in the tour are less than 3 miles, right? Are you shopping, picking up people, dropping off people, right? If so, that trip can't be replaced, right? Precipitation intensity. So in Seattle, it rains a lot. So if it's light rain, we assume that people, might still take their bikes out. If not, then we're going to assume that that trip cannot be replaced. Most bike share systems don't allow commuters under the age of 16 to rent a bike. So you have to be at least 16 years of age. and wind speed, right? So this is a safety thing, right? If the wind speed is greater than 20 miles per hour, you know, in most places, it's not deemed safe to you to operate a bicycle in that condition, right? So, you know, once all these trip conditions are met, then the trip can be replaced. You know, otherwise it can't, right? So we saw that about 18% of short car trips can be replaced by micromobility, right? So, you know, if 50% of short trips are done by a car, right? That means that about 9% of trips can be replaced by micromobility, right? So 91% of trips will still happen. So that 9% is your upper bound, right? So we did this study in Seattle. You know, and this pretty much shows you all of the traffic analysis zones that we looked at while doing this, right? And we simulated traffic throughout the region because we wanted to simulate trips traveling in, out, and around Seattle, right? So even the traffic that maybe is going from Kitsap to King or Sanomish to King, we wanted to simulate that too to have a robust model, right? So here's our study area. And one thing that we incorporate into our traffic simulation is an origin destination matrix, right? So this shows you how much demand is in your traffic simulation, right? Now, for example, right, this is important because when we're deciding which trips to replace, you know, we have to assume whether there's a bike lane or there's not a bike lane, right? There's a bike lane that can get you from one area to another. That trip goes from, for example, there's one trip going from, let's say, zone 1 to zone 3, that one trip becomes 0.5, right? So let me make sure I'm saying it. So if there is a bike lane, that one trip goes from 1 to 0. If there's not a bike lane, that trip goes from 1 to 0.5, right? Because you have to account for that car interacting with the traffic stream, right? So on and so forth, right? So, you know, like I said, we simulate 2 scenarios in terms of trip substitution. We simulate a 2014 scenario where OD pairs that have bike lanes, the passenger car equivalent goes to 0. OD pairs that do not have bike lanes, passenger car equivalent goes to 0.5, right? Then we did another one where we have wide scale bike deployment. That means between every single OD pair, there's a bike lane. Passenger car equivalent goes to 0 for those places, right? So if there's a bike lane, you're going to get better effects as opposed to if you have those bikes interacting with cars, right? And what we're saying is that bike lanes are going to be needed to maximize link performance, right? So what this shows you here is that so what this shows you here is you know, different congestion. Different congestion, no congestion, mild congestion. And it shows you what would happen if we had bike lanes, right? So at the 10% penetration rate, we could see, let's see, for example, severe congestion, the number of links with severe congestion would be reduced by, you know, more than 6% as opposed to 1 or 2% if you went with the 2014 scenario. But we see something pretty similar with the 18% penetration rate, right? But this shows you that in order to maximize performance, we're going to need more bike lanes. Otherwise, you're going to have cars interacting with bikes, and you won't get the performance that you're looking for, right? Or the benefits, right? And what we're also seeing is that so in Seattle, you have a lot of congestion on your highways, on your bridges, you know, downtown, right? So when you start to increase the penetration rate, these are going to be the areas that perceive the most benefits, right? So let's see, in your 18% wide scale bike lane deployment scenario, you're able to see speeds increase upwards of 10% during peak hour if you're able to get to the upper bound. And this shows you that urban roadways experience greater improvements, right? And this is because a lot of short trips take place on urban roadways as opposed to highways, right? So in terms of mildly congested links, at the, you know, if you get to the upper bound, urban arterials, you can see, you know, travel time decreases of 0.4%. And in severely congested links, you're seeing travel time decreases of, about 1%, right? And, that's just because, the same way as if you put cars on a severely congested link, you receive greater penalty. Once you take cars away from severely congested links, you're going to receive greater benefits, right? What this shows you is that, so right here, right? So long trips are going to make up a disproportionately large share of peak hour emissions, right? So at your 10% penetration rate, you only see about a 1% decrease in emissions and energy, right? Now at your upper bound, this is the most short car trips that we can replace with micromobility. Even if you got to the upper bound, you would only reduce emissions and energy use by 2%, right? So what this is showing you is that you're gonna need to do a lot more than replace short car trips if you want to get to net zero emissions. Right, you're gonna need vehicle electrification. You're gonna need to electrify your trucks. You're gonna need people to get on trains. You're gonna need to do a lot more than just get people on bikes. Right, all you did was get people on bikes. 98% of your emissions would still remain. Now, there is a large potential to replace micromobility, for micromobility to replace short car trips, right? So 9% of trips in Seattle, and different areas going to have different upper bounds. Like Southern California rains a lot less, so this might be in the 20%, right? Bike lanes are going to be needed to fully realize the full benefits of micromobility replacement, right? So, if you don't have bike lanes, you're going to get some benefits. But if you really want to get some of those congestion, travel time benefits, you're going to need bike lanes, right? Short trips are going to account for a disproportionately low amount of emissions and energy use compared to the number of short trips that take place, right? So even if you get rid of 18% of short trips, that's only going to reduce emissions and energy use by 2%, right? Right, and in addition to micromobility, other measures are needed. We talked about some of them: vehicle electrification, electrifying your buses. We're going to need to do a lot more than just get cars up the road and replace them with bikes, right? We need to target some of those longer trips. I'll talk about maybe 1 or 2 future projects that we have going on, but here are some things that my lab is focused on: automation, electrification, resilience, multimodal transportation, and I have a pretty big focus on transportation equity as well. In the resilience realm, we're looking at climate change. Climate change is bringing on more heavy rainfall events, right? A few years ago, we had one of the reddest years on record in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh has a roadway that floods a lot, right? And they had to actually put a bridge down, right? A lever down, right? Because people were drowned on that roadway, right? So we're trying to better understand when we have these really heavy rainfall events, what communities, what people are bearing those impacts, and how does that impact our transportation system as well, right? So that's one of the things that we're working on right now. We're also looking at autonomous delivery robots, right? They use just silos, right? One of the reasons that we're looking at this is because they used to have some of these deployments at Pitt, right? But one day there was a young lady. She had an ambulatory difficulty, and she was crossing the street, and one of these were her pathway, right? It kind of trapped her on the roadway. She didn't know what to do. The robot didn't know what to do. So they actually had to stop the pilot, right? Because that put her life in jeopardy, right? It's a safety issue, right? And what that shows is that whatever use case and planning that they did, people with disabilities were not considered, right? This just goes to that thing of like, how can we start to plan and deploy systems with communities and do things with communities instead of to communities, right? So we're doing a lot of community engagements, trying to see how this technology could best benefit them. And we're trying to develop simulations to better understand how having more things in your sidewalk, like autonomous delivery robots can impact safety, congestion for different user groups like people with disabilities. And we're also looking at equitable deployment of EV charging infrastructure, right? So on the left here, you have Pittsburgh. On the right here, you have Seattle. And what this picture is showing you is that most of your charging infrastructure is concentrated in very few areas around the region, right? So in Pittsburgh, downtown, near UPenn and CMU, that's where most of your charges are located. In Seattle, near downtown and near University of Washington, right? Now we want people to get EVs, want people to kind of shift from their internal combustion engine. But we don't have electric vehicle charging infrastructure, right? So as the federal government, as state and local agencies begin to deploy more charging infrastructure, how do we make sure that we're doing this in an equitable manner? And how do we make sure that low income minority populations also have access to some of this infrastructure as well? I'll finish it off with this. And one other thing we want to make sure we're doing too is, we're actually working with power grid modelers, right? So in the past, power systems and transportation systems, their models have they've been separate, right? So we've been, we've done transportation systems modeling, we've done power systems modeling separately. Now we want to combine the two. We want to co-optimize, have them communicate with each other. In the past, especially with internal combustion engine vehicles, there was no need for power systems modelers and transportation modelers to interact as much, right? But now that the power grid is up, we're trying to get that pretty closely tied to the transportation system. We want to start to interact with each other, start to develop models that can communicate with each other. Instead of having one system that's optimized independently, we want to have a co-optimized system. So that's it for me. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks for having me, everyone.
I have a few minutes for questions, so.
Yes, thank you so much for the nice presentation. I think it was slides 25 to 27 where you showed different levels of AV penetration to the market and how the scale starts to shift when it comes to sustainability. I think that was done for Seattle. And I was wondering, did this analysis or study take into account any existing public transit networks that is along Seattle? I don't know personally if there's any sort of public transit system there, but I was just wondering that if these are the parking spaces that are outside of the downtown area, and we're considering the scenario of, okay, you go to the downtown, then your AV goes and parks itself on those parking lots. What if there's a connected public transit system that directly connects those far away parking areas, so you can just park your normal car there and then just take a bus or a train or whatever? I was wondering, like, if this whole study considered the scope of the existing public transit networks.
No, so we did not consider that. I guess I think during the time we were doing this study, we were thinking that people typically park pretty close to where the destination is right now. And you could do what you said, and you could park your car right here, take a train down and take a train back. But the convenience of an AV is that you don't have to do that anymore. You could go right to work. You don't have to wake up 20-30 minutes earlier. You go right to work, park, get out the car, send it to where you wanted to go, and it can come pick you back up when you need it again. So that, I guess that'd be something for future work that we could maybe consider.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Thank you for the presentation. In the first part, you showed us the equation for the emission, and there was an emission factor, the CO2 per gallon. I was wondering, how is that number different between the different levels of automation, or is it not?
Oh, so this is just the amount of direct carbon emissions in a gallon of gasoline, right? So this is not necessarily about the vehicle. The gallons per mile is about the vehicles, right? So the gallons per mile is related to the vehicle efficiency. CO2 per gallon is more related to the gasoline itself, right? So how much emissions would you burn if you went through a gallon of gasoline, no matter how efficient your vehicle is? So if you get 100 miles per gallon and you drove that 100 miles, you would still get that emissions factor from going that 100 miles. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
So it's 2:15 now, okay.
Oh, wait, just a quick question, thank you. Actually a few, but I'll be quick. Here regarding this study, do you consider competition among the AVs? And then you seem to be modeling the decision making for individual AVs, or what information does the AV know on a system level, and they compete for the parking lots? How do they reconcile the competition?
So there's no competition here, right?
But
So,
you have limited capacities.
right. So there's no parking
Okay,
available, then the AV can't park there. They have to find somewhere else to park, right?
but it could be taken by another AV, right? Like,
So the way we simulate it is that you know, once an AV makes the decision to park there, you know, if the parking runs out, another AV, the next AV up in the queue won't even consider that parking lot anymore.
The queue is like in the cloud, right? It's not
Yeah.
like there
Yeah,
in the parking lot, right? Like
Right.
if you were gonna go there, it tells you it from a distance that it's taken up.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So in the model, you know, we kind of make it so that at one time, you know, a single AV is making a decision, that AV makes the decision, so on and so forth. You know, so there's, you know, I get what you're saying. Like, what if two people are going to the same parking lot at one time? Who gets it? But this did not simulate competition.
I see. If I make really quick, just to clarify, later with the micro mobility you mentioned, it's understandable. Short distance travel 3 miles you consider, right? It's not gonna save much. But the micro mobility is really the bigger role is to connect to the public transit, for example, as a feeder mode. Did you in your 3 mile distance range, do you consider those sort of connecting trips that people take the micro mobility to go to the bus station? Do you consider that?
No, so what we just did was we looked at short car trips, you know, and we just wanted to know if that short car trip itself could be replaced by micromobility. So let's say that you know, somebody took a short car trip to a transit stop, you know, then you know, we could consider if that portion of it could be replaced by micromobility. If so, then it would be a part of that upper bound, right? But you know, does that make sense? So we just looked at the car trips.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
micro mobility could allow a 10 mile trip to be replaced by transit because you enable the last mile connection.
Correct.
So there's a larger effect that it could contribute to. So
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Okay, it's 2:50. So thank you, everyone. Let's thank Professor.